London, and we have our Q&A live about the interview which was posted yesterday. Oh, hello, Trump-Luke. Oh, I'm so happy to see you here. So we're discussing the interview which was published yesterday with ROSTYSLAV KHOTIN, journalist. He's editor for Radio Free for Europe. He's a dear friend. He is my former colleague and boss when I was working for BBC Ukrainian. So we were talking and debunking Kremlin myths in Europe, because Rostislav, he's based in Prague. And we were talking about sort of like all the new narratives and how to resist and how significant or influential or not they are. We had a little bit of laugh, you know, because you can't really be serious when you're referring to Putin's historical statements. So I just remind you, Rostislav KHOTIN, and also under the video of our interview, I posted the link to his articles. He is very knowledgeable in history, and he is very deep, and usually his articles explain the context and draw in the bigger picture. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check it out. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. If you're here on this podcast, you will enjoy it. Rostislav is amazing, and I have endless admiration, respect for him. He's an amazing person. So I'm so honored to have him on my podcast. If you haven't watched it, please don't hesitate. Just hit the button after this live and watch it and let me know what you think. So I just remind you the main things which were discussed which were discussed on the interview. So 170 times Russia tried to ban Ukrainian language in the space of time of 150 years of history. So when Putin says Ukraine is not a state, Ukraine doesn't exist, Ukraine was something artificially created by Lenin, you understand it's all doesn't make sense, because otherwise they wouldn't try to ban the language of the country which doesn't exist. But Ukraine survived, and Ukraine made it and still exists, and returning Kursk. We will talk about it later. So also fascinating thing was said that Ukraine ruled over Russia for 300 years. So Ukraine ruled over Russia 300 years, then Russia ruled partly sort of Ukraine when some parts of Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire. It's okay. And also Putin still can't forgive that Ukraine split off and went on path, and then Yeltsin said, well, if Ukraine left Soviet Union, then it doesn't make sense to carry on, because Ukrainian resources, basically Ukraine was the foundation. Baltic countries were lucky, they joined NATO straight away. Ukraine is still getting there, fingers crossed. We will be there one day. Also, Russian propaganda likes manipulate about the anti-Semitism and intolerance in Ukraine. Look at Ukraine now. Ukraine, over 76% voted for ethnic Jewish president. Defense minister is Muslim, and it's all fine. So what can be better? Manifesting that Ukraine is the home country for everyone. And being honest, it's my personal sort of discoveries. I realized that because Ukraine was a different time of its history, part of different empires, we learned how to live peacefully with different kind of people. And being patient, it's part of our mentality until Yanukovych, former president, beat our children on Maidan. I'm referring to the start of Revolution of Dignity. So that's the thing we can't forgive, and this is when it's all started. Let's have a look. Good evening to everyone. Trump-Luke says, if things continue to go as bad as they currently go in the US, I think I start thinking about kind of Maidan in Washington. What Americans can learn from Ukraine and how to be successful. Wow, it's oh wow. Good question. Well, you have a good Ukrainian community in Washington. I'm sure they have tips, and Ukrainians are very good at letting know the authorities they're not happy about. And I was personally participant of the Orange Revolution. I still have artifacts. I still have my raincoat, and there were stickers, and there were other bits. I still have it in my box in the attic. And last year, there was the 20th anniversary. I missed this moment, but I'm sure we will talk about it. And so it's just, you see, I think Americans are very good at their democracy, sort of their second name. So I'm sure they, especially with the Ukrainian assistant, it won't be a problem to create Maidan. But hopefully it's gonna go well. You see, let's try to look at the bright side and keeping fingers crossed. Do you know, it's the Munich conference that will be very sort of important, because it's gonna go in a few days, in 4 days. So Munich Defense Conference, Security Conference, is starting on 14th of February until 16th, and this is when we're gonna find out what kind of middle ground for the peace negotiations, and where Donald Trump and his team are heading to. So it's for Ukraine and for Americans. I don't know. It's difficult to say, Jean-Luc, really. Well, let's hope for better. I mean, the man promised to make America great again. Just wait for greatness, I guess. The other interesting thing, you remember the beginning of invasion. We head into the 3rd anniversary of full-scale invasion and 11 years of war. And Putin promised to take Kiev in 3 days. So it's 3 years Ukraine standing, and we have Ukrainian soldiers in Kursk region and German tanks in Russia. So how is that? Also, the other thing, you should remember this narrative, like we say in the Russian speakers, lots of manipulation about it, and it's much deeper, and it needs to be explained more historically, like why people actually speak Ukrainian version of Russian language, because you were actually criminally prosecuted for Ukrainian language, you were forbidden. So basically people, in order to survive, they were trying to adapt. It's like brief explanation. But the thing is, I just remind you, in January last year, President Zelensky signed a decree which calls on the territory of the Russian Federation historically inhabited by Ukrainians. In particular, he noted that for centuries Russia has systematically committed, it continues to commit actions aimed at the destruction of national identity, oppression of Ukrainians, and the violation of their rights and freedoms, including on lands historically inhabited by them in Kuban, Starodub region, northern eastern Slobozhanщina within the modern Krasnodar territory, Belgorod, Bryansk, Voronezh, Kursk, and Rostov, regions of the Russian Federation. There's a chance to save all those poor ethnic Ukrainians from Putin's regime. What do you think? Should Ukraine go to save? Of course it's a joke. I know how difficult and how dramatic on the battlefield, but I'm just saying the history and the territory is overlapped and twisted, and all that nonsense that coming from Putin and from Kremlin, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay, and let's have a look at the comments under the video you left yesterday. So Camila Matson very kindly saying, thank you, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, because I was looking forward to talking to Rostik, and I enjoyed talking to him, and I was listening, so I'm glad with that. Dominic saying, thank you, Jenny, fighting the Russian propaganda is incredibly important. Yes, it is. And you know, I was mentioning during our interview with Rostek, there was research I came across preparing for the for our conversation, and there was, I think, Lviv Media Forum did research about it, and they found out that actually Kremlin specifically targets certain countries with certain narratives. For example, in Germany, it's about the saving, the great Russian culture, and usually they use useful idiots or people who sympathize Putin and support Russia among the intellectuals. So it looks pretty innocent, but it's great push of Kremlin narratives. And also, I came across very interesting fact. You know about this great Russian culture myth. I personally believe there is no such great and less great or insignificant. There are, if every country has culture and it's equally interested, literature is equally exciting, deep, and if those names in the history, they do. Oh, Maximilian, hello, hello. They do have right to exist in classics, so we can't overestimate Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or Pushkin just because Kremlin says it's the great culture. So what I found out that in 19th century, so basically after Napoleonic Wars and when Russia wanted to sort of like expand its authority in Europe and to prove their right to be equal among the European countries, and they actually set up the program. Two people were involved, Uvarov, that time Minister of Education, and Fyodor Tyutchev. Anybody who knows anything about Russian poetry or literature, they would know Tyutchev is actually quite a good poet. So what they did, they set up a program, the state program, how to sort of get on with propaganda, Russian propaganda in Europe, and prove them how great is Russian culture. And they did it quite a long time. And the first attempt of publishing Dostoevsky failed dramatically. Europeans didn't get it and were not interested. And only after 15 years of this sort of like different means trying to convince people that this culture is great, read this author, actually then the second basically German translation of Dostoevsky was successful. So yes, and this is how it started. And look, 2025, and we're still dealing with this. Anyway, and when I mentioned it, Rostik said the other thing, that people in Russia is probably not affected by the great some ideas of the classical literature because they were committing all those atrocities and those inhumane things. Okay, Maximilian, you saying, what actual effect did it all have on Russian culture? Is Pushkin an expression of Russian culture? Or thin layer never reaching the populace? Well, it's very interesting questions from you, always deep. Look, Pushkin was artificially appointed, basically created. There's one of the versions because he was writing his poems, but he was not even close as the sort of like the people's poet or the like later basically the Soviet propaganda, they needed something. You see, Ukraine has Taras Shevchenko, who was people's poet. His Kobzar, his basically book of his poems, it was as holy for Ukrainian families, ordinary people, as Bible. So, and if you check Taras Shevchenko, you will see how much he means for Ukrainians. And I'm sure every Ukrainian will tell you, it doesn't matter what kind of status or level, or they like literature or not, they will quote you Shevchenko. Just stay away. I will sort of, could say, testament. Як умру, то поховайте мене на могилі серед степу широкого на Вкраїні милій. So there was like where he supposed to be buried after his death. And the other thing, I was year 4. And we were learning poems, and I still remember it. Не називають її раєм. Не називаю раєм тієї хатиночки у гаї, над чистим ставом, край села, мене там мати повела, і повиваючи співала, свою нудьгу переливала. This poem, first one, the second one, it was Kobzar. And I'm sure every Ukrainian can quote you. So, Soviets, they needed to create Russian Byron, or people's poet, and Pushkin was quite convenient for that. So, and they started sort of through literature, through educational program in schools, and they created it, and they basically, yeah, he was artificially. I mean, his poems great. I learned them, and coming back to your question. Right, this is what I mean. So the first part of the question, you say, you were particularly struck by Khotin's question, have Russians read Leo Tolstoy? A part of school program. That's what he said. Basically, at school, you had to read Tolstoy, you have to learn sort of a passage or a few, and then you read it by heart, basically. Because you see, a classic is something Russians would manifest. That's genius Tolstoy, and he would say, oh, this mysterious Russian soul, we deep and we controversial, and it's impossible to understand it because we're so mysterious Russians. And he was saying, if people, majority of those who are at the front line and coming and occupying Ukraine and doing those atrocities and war crimes, what they did with the civilians, vulnerable people, armless, I mean, no ammunition, no guns, no anything, and they create there, especially Bucha, Izum, you know, if you follow the news, those things. If those people were reading own classics like Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, they would never do those things. And so they would manifest it, but I don't think they read it. Those people, you see, it's like I read a lot of Tolstoy. I'm from central Ukraine, and my school was Russian. It didn't affect, you know, me in any way. So I am from Ukrainian speaking family. But anyway, so I read lots of Dostoevsky. At some point, he was my favorite, together with others. Tolstoy. So in a way, it's changing your brain like any book, and it's actually making you more human. So those people who did all those war crimes, it's unlikely they read own classics and own literature, which they manifest and showing off everywhere. I think that was the idea of what Rostislav was saying. Oh, they like talking about it. They read Dostoevsky or something. But being honest, Dostoevsky is not easy to read. I remember when I was, I think, year 6, and we started at the Russian literature Russian literature lessons about Dostoevsky. And I noticed when I was starting, it's like after 30 minutes, I had headache. He's difficult, but then you get in there. And for example, some books, his earlier novels, they sort of like a bit easier. They're still dark, but easier. The later, they sort of like, oh, difficult to digest. But it's still, you know, if it resonates with you, why not? And then you also saying, Maximilian saying, Russia not alone in this audit of the shelf legitimacy to be in the European. Yes, I mean, you see, it's just like at the moment why we talk about Russia and sort of like from different angles and from different aspects, because Russia became super dangerous. Look at the Baltic countries, look at Finland, Sweden, how they just speedy track join NATO. It's not just because they wanted it ever, is it? It's just because urgent, there was need, because they see how dangerous Russia. And you see what Putin is doing. He's trying to sort of like small victorious war, which doesn't feel anywhere in Moscow, and to keep like life as usual, a part of killing own boys and citizens of neighboring country, and pretending like it's all okay, but it's not actually. It's not. Okay, and you're saying what actual effect did it all have on Russian culture? Well, would it have effect? Well, it's a good question. Pushkin is one of the sort of like attributes. Dostoevsky. See, I don't know if you speak Russian. You probably did. You probably do. But yes, it's kind of like, you know, Byron, Shakespeare, you know, of British literature. Yeah, it's one of those staples. I don't know if the thin layer is actually reaching the populace. You see, in Soviet Union, there was kind of like trendy, and people were very limited with choices. So buying classics, buying books and collecting books, it was trendy. So and then there was wild 90s, and I think it was the shift, big shift. So I don't think it's very much anymore. Look at those what you see on Telegram or TikTok. I don't think those people been even sitting near close to the classics. Spiros is saying, good evening, have linked your stream on Blue Sky. Okay. Much love, Slava Ukraini. Oh, thank you. Heroям Slava. Okay. What was, sorry, was my you mean my poems, my reading poems was too fast? Okay. Sorry. I should have been slower. Okay, only me saying I'm learning Ukrainian, but that was a bit too quick for me. Oh, I'm sorry. Charmflux saying, I fear multi-channel comments don't work. Only half of them make it to London. Cheryl, hello. Oh, that's where the Skiaducha comes from. Yes. I love the sound of Jenny speaking Ukrainian. Makes me feel happy. Oh, we can start every live with Ukrainian poems, which I love very much. But you probably would hear a lot of Lina Kostenko. She is my soul mate in poetry. I love poetry very, very much. But sadly, I can't keep up. Okay, it takes me minutes to decode. And when I'm done, she's already in 3 sentences ahead of me. Right, okay. Next time I'm sort of reading poems, speaking Ukrainian, I promise, I give you my word, I'm going to be as slowly as I can be. Matthew saying, what will happen if Ukraine decides to surrender? Oh, Matthew, it's just, did Putin say what he actually wants? Yes, he wants Ukraine without Ukrainians, because he says Ukraine as identity is the same as Russia, which is not true. You know, I like the quote of my professor from university, and he was saying, while we were printing books, I mean like Kiev and Rus, those wild animals were still sort of walking in the forest, and everything was covered with moss. Well, more or less it's kind of truth, but basically you see, it's for Putin, it's not just about territory. He's just trying to grab. He's not capable and never aimed to solve the problems within the country, the problems they have, because him and his inner circle, they're trying to sort of like to become as rich as they can be. By the way, Putin and what he's trying, it just started on the Russian resources. It's early to say, but it's a very interesting thing happened. So the Putin's, I think it's his older daughter, who's the doctor, Maria Vorontsova, I think one of her names. Basically, they started spreading like the Kremlin propaganda, saying that she's the doctor, she went to the front line, she was treating dozens and dozens or maybe thousands of Russian soldiers, and also under the missiles, and there were explosions, and she was sort of injured, and this is spreading. Kind of. There are speculations why it's happening, because both his daughters, legitimate ones, they kind of like with different names, and most of the spotlights, if they do, for example, Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, it's very safe environment. But now kind of pushing, maybe they sort of like testing the plan of succession for his daughter. So let's see. It's a bit too early to analyze, to see, but it's still propaganda, but just for an inner audience. So I thought I would mention it because it might be interesting with time. If the Russian population respond positively, they probably carry on pushing it. Okay, and so Matthew, coming back to your question, Putin will destroy Ukrainians, how he destroyed people, civilians in Bucha, in Izium, in Mariupol. So it's not just about land. It's about existence. And if you leave your country, it's very difficult to maintain your culture, your identity, your language, everything. So it's a lot for Ukrainians at stake. Please recommend some poetry for us. I will. I need to think. I might have Shevchenko a book here in London. I need to check. I probably will need to do separate live on poetry, but it's dangerous. It's very dangerous because I like poetry and it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I'll have a look. And I'll think about it. Something that it would be interesting. Hello, Chris. Hello. I'm glad you could join. Johnny, hello. Yes, he does. Yes, he will still. You see, he doesn't take only resources. Look at the territories he already occupied, a part of Georgia or in Chechnya. Do you remember when Chechnya in the 90s, two wars were trying to fight for independence? They basically destroy. Even who is from Germany? Just remind, is there anyone from Germany? From Eastern Germany? And when Berlin was split, it wasn't, you could see, I spent one summer, couple months in Berlin in my 20s, and it was obviously by that time Berlin was one country, Germany was one country, Berlin didn't have the wall. No, Eastern. Yeah, but basically, visually, you could see the difference between East Berlin and West Berlin. And this is for Russians to you. So they never invest, they never actually interested in developing territories. They only taking, robbing, and bringing all the bad things. Okay. Maximilian, so we know now that you are from the west of Western Germany. Well, I have to say, while we're talking about Germany briefly, I have to say there's a special place in Germany for me and my family, place we've been going for holidays, if I'm not wrong, 7 years or something. And it's a Rhineland area on the border with Luxembourg, and lovely. It's the best town ever. Traben-Trarbach is just the sweetest place in Germany for me. Okay, Cheryl saying, turns the young generation into soldiers to conquer the next country. Yes, you see, it's just like the to rob, to kill, to destroy. That's the only thing they can do, unfortunately. And it's very sad, isn't it? It's just, instead of, we are in 21st century, our sort of technologies, AI, you know, fighting cancer, fighting other illnesses, you know, just make life better, and, you know, feed those countries which needs it. But instead we have like the product of the Soviet propaganda, this creature, and he's just brings darkness, death, suffering. I can't even believe we're still dealing with this people. Chris saying, I've been to Germany, Luxembourg. It's lovely there, isn't it? In these wine festivals and these people amazing. Yeah. So what do you think? Should Ukraine, let me know right now in the chat. So if Ukraine should return the territories and protect ethnic Ukrainians in the Russian Federation, if they can, of course. Chris saying, I had beer and ice cream there, not the same time. Ice cream is amazing, the spaghetti ice cream. Oh, Johnny saying, seems the wall is still there, just turned into physical to virtual. Is it? Do you actually feel it? Johnny, are you from Germany? And its spreading has taken deep root in the US. Oh, yeah, unfortunately. Yes, we do value our people, and no, we won't. And you know, I will tell you this, it's still sort of like in the process of production. It's something which happened on the occupied territory. And I interviewed a person who was in captivity there. And things are happening. I really want you to hear, but it needs to be translated, because my guest did not speak, he doesn't speak English good enough to tell all those tragic stories. But I'll be honest with you, since our interview, I lost my sleep, and I sort of either waking up in the middle of the night or waking up every hour. And I can't say that it was, I knew how bad it was because I was preparing, but you need to hear this. When it's ready, I'll publish, and I want you to hear, to see what's happening, because, you know, usually in Ukraine there's a lot of possible coverage of the what's happening on the occupied territories, but not so much in the English language media, because there is no access. That's why I thought it's important. It doesn't matter how difficult it would be for me personally, but we have to go through this. Okay. Chris saying AFD has support. You about this political party. Maxim said, my Ukrainian friend Arkady used to say my Russian sounded like an intoxicated person who's really inhabited from Vologda, and he laughed loud when I spoke Russian. Well, Ukrainians need to be more tolerant, yeah. Don't worry about it. As long as people can understand you, you know, that's doesn't matter. Only me. Rick, the Ukrainian, sometimes speaks about his time living under occupation in Makiyevka. Poor thing. Was he in captivity as well? Because they come, arrest, and they let people go, and they asking for ransom, or they blackmailing. Ukrainian, and still try. Well, go for it. We might start Ukrainian language on the Ukrainian Jenny podcast. Do you know, I did one trick when I was a schoolgirl. And I had American teacher, Laura Vanderberg. She's still my friend and very dear friend. And she was one of the Peace Corps volunteers. And she was determined to learn Russian. Obviously, the school she was, my school, as I mentioned a bit earlier today, was Russian. But I didn't want her to learn Russian. And we agreed, because we both were jogging together, we were preparing for half marathon, and we did eventually it in Kiev on Independence Day, basically. And she was asking, how to say this, how to say that? And instead of Russian option, I was giving her Ukrainian. And when he arrived to her sort of like group coordinator to Kiev, and Laura wanted to show off how well she learned Russian, and I think Tamara, the woman's name, she was shocked, because like, Laura, you speak in Surzhyk, which is like mix of Ukrainian and Russian, because I was teaching her Ukrainian. So yeah, it was all uncovered. To me, Russian sounds like a human sneer. It's hard for me to listen to anything in the accent. He fled. Oh, thank goodness for him that he escaped, sort of fled the occupation. Oh, right. No, like under radar. Oh, that's good. That's good, because they do unspeakable things for men, women, children, teenagers. They and some. Okay, I'm not gonna give up, Losh, because I'm still shocked after everything I've heard. Oh, well done him. So this guy is doing amazing fundraising for Ukraine with the English-speaking community. That's amazing. That's fantastic. That's sort of, yeah. Do you know, we all, Ukrainians, we donate, we're fundraising, we sort of, trying our best, and it's at least you can do for the soldiers on the front line, especially soldiers on the front line. They need everything all the time, because one explosion and everything you had, a car, all the belongings, everything, it's all on fire, and you need to start from the very beginning. Johnny's saying he also had a lot of interesting guests, Jenny. You should consider joining him for a session or two. I wouldn't mind. He didn't contact me, so I'm open and very welcoming to everyone. Rick's Rollers presents. One thing I wanted to let you know. So on Thursday, those who, I think Johnny was there, and if you watched, we had a guest on live on Thursday, Vlad from International Legion. I just explained that he was before on the podcast about a month ago, but he was masked at that time because he's representative for International Legion, and it's part of the defense intelligence. So at that time he didn't have permission to speak with open face. By Thursday he had this permission, and we saw him, and he spoke, and we were discussing films, and one of you mentioned The White Raven, about the sniper. This film I watched in Ukrainian cinema. I think it was in August to September 2022. At that time I was in Kiev, and so I watched the film, and some of you mentioned it in the comments. Apparently Vlad was filmed in Sniper or White Raven. So if you're interested, just watch it if you have Amazon Prime, because today I was trying to figure out where he was. I need to rewatch it again because I didn't know. Rick, Anna from Ukraine, Savage says, Starsky, Yuli, would be great to talk to about propaganda. Absolutely, yeah. And I think Anna, it came across with recommendations. There was something about propaganda, myths, debunking. Yeah, we do need, because it's the other war. You see, Russia, after collapse Soviet Union, was very much conquering Ukraine culturally, sort of like the book market. 90% of books in Ukrainian shops and Ukrainian markets were from Russia. They were Russian language books. If I wanted to buy Ukrainian book or any book in Ukrainian language, there were specific, some small bookshops or one or two places at a huge book market. Show business, the same thing. So there was like, it's more deeper, it's basically vast culturally, and Ukraine needs to regain itself in all those aspects. Yeah, it's all very important. So he's picking up with Azov rallies and finds some interesting guests there. Well, Azov, yeah, they're very impressive, and yeah, that's good. That's good. You have access to them and you hear them. It's very important because Azov was very much misinterpreted in the West, and it's so unfair because I admire the bravery and patriotism of those people. Chris saying, I wish that we had in the West could hear more from ordinary Ukrainians who can say why they prefer fighting instead of peace with Russia. Okay. I'll see what I can do. Yeah, I thought she has the some academic background. It's about Anna. Cheryl saying she's linguistics professor. Starsky runs a propaganda study institute in Germany while being a reservist in the Ukrainian armed forces. He was one of the Hostomel heroes. You should really check him out. I will check him out, Johnny, I promise. I promise. It's just, the truth is, there are things I wanted to do as a journalist. There are things I have already in the process, some great stories. And the truth is, my team is very, very small. So if we talk about those interviews you can see, which I record via Zoom, it's me and my, he's not just picture editor, he's executive producer, he's big inspiration, Terry. And he's absolutely genius. He's not just journalist, and all those teasers and all those creations is just, he does his magic. So it's two of us. If you see the stories when I'm sort of out and it's not on Zoom, so then I have on board I have a lovely two genius cameraman, and they help a lot and support a lot. So, and yeah, it's just the many things I would like to make, sometimes it's just not enough time, and not enough because, you know, as you can see, it's very much limited and small team. Oh, I know Anastasia Paraskeva, we came across, yes, because Anastasia, so she was discovered by Dan Rivas, ITV journalist. At that time I was working for ITV, and he found her, sort of like came across her, I think in Kharkiv, and she was, so he did, I think, some diaries for him, basically. And then we also asked her to do diaries when we were doing a film. I was producing a documentary for ITV about the invasion, and that film was based on people's video diaries on daily basis from different parts of Ukraine, and Anastasia was one of those people. So yeah, she's a strong, powerful voice for Ukrainians in the West. Yes, I saw bits of that show. Well done her, and I know she came across through lots of drama and tragedy, and one of the attacks and blasts killed her father, and she went through a lot. It was difficult, but I'm glad she finds energy and inspiration to carry on, nevertheless anything. And Lena from Crimea. Oh, interesting. I don't know about Lena from Crimea. I'll check, Johnny. I'll check, Aziza. Iskander. And then as for poetry, get ready to know more about Lena Kostenko. She's still pretty much alive, and she's a living legend. And she's, her poetry is just, you know, I have one book which I have probably for 20 years or something, and I always travel with that, and my romances and falling in love, I will sort of like through, I even have the dates written when this or that poem resonated with me big time. And then a couple of years ago I had like the beautiful, the collector's edition of Lena Kostenko, which is like on my shelf, and I'm trying to be very careful with that. Cheryl say, Jenny, your guests are very unique. Thank you. It's valuable to see new people we haven't heard from before. That's the whole thing. You see, when I was with ITV as a news producer, I realized that, first of all, with the news, because I'm referring right for the big corporation, big stories and very limited time. And in order for people to open up, to go deep, to go wide, you just need to wait for anniversary to get another documentary out. And for me, it wasn't enough. And that was one of the strong impulses why I decided to go on my own and do this podcast, because I wanted to give the platform for people you wouldn't see. And there are so many great speakers. For example, one of them, he was my second video on the podcast. I think first one was John Sweeney, and second was General Kondratyuk. He's amazing. He's sensation. And it's, and then sort of, I wanted to give more speakers from Ukraine for the English-speaking audience. Yes, it's difficult when they don't speak Ukrainian. It takes me very long time to translate it, and then voiceover. Now with AI is a bit easier, but still, you know, it's very consuming. But otherwise, you wouldn't hear or wouldn't see this people. For example, the artist Yevgenia Hapchinska, she's creating all her paintings is about happiness, is about love, is about something very dear, something very delicate. But what she went through, because Russians, her house in the Kiev region was in the occupied village, and she was witness to all those war crimes. And when I was in Kiev for the second anniversary, and I was recording lots of interviews, and I wanted to show her as a painter of happiness from Ukraine, because otherwise you wouldn't hear about her. But it was one of the most difficult. But she's such an amazing person. If you haven't watched interview with her, please check it out. She's on that day we had 3 interviews. She was the first one. She was at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we were shocked. Me and cameraman, we were hypnotized. Check it out. Yes, she didn't speak English. She was translated, and my dear friend Becky did the voiceover. But it was worth it, and I hope you will you will check it out if you miss it. You have a long list of potential English-speaking Ukrainian YouTube channels now. Absolutely. It's gonna keep me busy. You take a screenshot or 2 of this chat. Oh, I definitely do. Yes. Yeah, because I need it. You know, it's nice. I really enjoy that we have this this connection, and you opening something for me. You saying, you pointing at some important aspects I wouldn't think about it. It's very important. Thank you for doing this. Carry on. Usually you're very kind and positive and supportive, but it's okay if you don't agree, or if you want to contradict. It's fine. That's why we have this discussion. If you link in with them, you will probably get a very much wider audience too. I wouldn't mind, but you see, it should be a kind of like mutual process. So I think we will get there, if they're interested, of course. Yes, Johnny saying, yes, please grow all the UA communities and networks. Ukraine will win. Of course, there is no other option. But, you know, it's interesting. I know we have from social media, you know, when Ukrainian soldiers do these videos and they sort of cheerful and patriotic, but they have meltdowns as well, because it's very difficult, especially when they lose the mates and people. Yes, Cheryl saying, especially those from the east and under occupation is so important. Absolutely, yes. Yes, because they seems like invisible. And yes, so I don't want to give up to spoil too much. I'm just very excited about things preparing so far. Yes, Cheryl, she's the artist and I love her so much. Please, please try to listen. Yes, I know. You did! You listened to Taras Topola. Only me saying, I loved your interviews with Taras Topola and with Ballerina. Oh, well, thank you. You know, because those interviews didn't get much views, and I understand that if you're a star, you probably star in your own country, and it's difficult to. But I wanted you to hear Taras Topola and Valery Harchishin. It's Druga Reka, is another musician, and Taras Topola, he was a serviceman himself. And he did this collaboration with Ed Sheeran, and Valery Harchishin, his brother, is at war. His elder son is a serviceman and soldier. So those people, obviously, the war affected all of us. And Valerina, she's a big inspiration, because ballet is always association with Russian ballet, and she does, of course, she does a lot of for those people who are interested, particularly in dancing, but she does a lot of educational videos, and this is how I came across of her, and she inspired me a lot. And I know how hard she's working in the archives to get some bits of information. That's why I sort of offered her, and she was so good. And because she's based in Lviv, and for our interview, she took overnight train to Kiev. She arrived. She was, you know, she just came into this apartment, which was the studio where I was filming, and you can see the star came in. You know, it's the energy, it's the brightness, it's the energy. And yes, Taras Topola, thank you for saying this. It really keeps me going, because when I understand when it's not many views, and I understand that we humans click on familiar faces, but I thought it's important for you to understand about and to have an opportunity to learn about this aspect of life in Ukraine. Johnny saying, Discord is also a great source of information. Most YouTubers has served links under their videos. Okay. Is there a unique Ukrainian art form? Yes, there is, Chris, and I think, and we should talk about it. Thank you, Chris. Cheryl saying, I've been trying to spread your videos. Oh, Cheryl, you're so kind. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. It's just the problem of being a new small channel. Yes, I know. I remember when Silicon was like that. Wow, yeah, now he's big, and then and it's great, you know, it takes time. But yes, and you know, it's a big change, because all my life I was working, I started with a small sort of television channels in Ukraine, and then there was the biggest channel, and then I was working for BBC, and then BBC here in the UK, and then ITV. So basically, when brand works for itself, it's a different matter. And you as a journalist, when you contacting someone or arranging someone, it's you feel the difference. And I'll be honest with you, 90% of people, they just ignore you. Once they asked me for money, and I said, I'm very sorry, but just right now I'm just investing. I don't make any money, so I can't really pay you anything. And also about many people just ignoring you, and it's okay, I get it, but that's why I really appreciate when people like General Shirev or General Kondratyuk or Zhenya Gapchinska, the artist I mentioned, or General Hodges, they just agree. And being unknown to them, some of them I know because of the because I'm a journalist and we've been in contact long before my YouTube podcast. But for example, yes, when General Shirev, Hodges, Chris Steele, former MI6 officer, when they agree, and I understand it's the generosity of their soul, and or for example, when there was given the access to the military on the training grounds, and I met pilots as well who were training for F-16. It means a lot, and I really appreciate it. But I have to say, it's patience. YouTube requires patience, and patience is not my strongest thing, so I'm training it and try to just carry on. And thank you for you, each of one of you. You are very kind, you're very supportive, and you're finding time to spend with me, to watch those videos, to discuss it. It means a lot. So I can't express how grateful I am. Jenny says, hey, Greg started with 5 viewers, now he's one of the highest Yale helpers out there. Oh, thank you for saying this. Johnny saying, Greg Terry started with 5 viewers, now he's one of the mightiest UA helpers out there, supporting Ukrainian military IDs and connections all the way to the top of both Ukraine and US. You know, when you're saying like that, you really inspire me, and sort of I can't express how grateful I am. Jonathan Pierce to ATP Geopolitics. Thank you, Cheryl. You did recommend, and I'll do wink, wink, nudge, nudge for this Sunday. 6 p.m. UK time, and I hope it will be interesting for you. So that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for finding time, for your comments, for being of the community. Chris, Denis Davonov. I'll check him. I haven't heard about him. I'm not probably very good at about it. Thank you for being. You don't even know how much it means to me. This it's not just about a podcast. It's about this stage of my life. Maybe it will be the time and the place to talk about it, but thank you for your kindness and for your support, and I'm grateful for any suggestions, and yeah, let's make fun and interest in it for all of us. So next live is going to be on Thursday, and we will discuss some current events. I see with the guest, it's sort of like seems like interesting. If I can, if it's possible, I'll try to get us a guest where we could discuss the current situation. Have a lovely evening. I send you lots of love, lots of Ukrainian love from London. And I'll do the screenshots, I'll do the notes, and we'll check it out and come back to you all. Thank you. Mwah. Героям слава!